Honorable House, resume its sitting. First, I would like to apologize to the public for late start. We have been experiencing some difficulties, so I do apologize for that. I call on the Honorable Kevin Malone, Minister of Health, to give an update of COVID-19.
I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank this honorable House for the opportunity to give an update on the COVID-19 situation in the Virgin Islands as at 13 December 2021. Mr. Speaker, since its publication of December 6, 2021, CAFA is reporting that an additional 13,682 cases of COVID-19 were confirmed in 32 countries within the Caribbean, bringing the region's total confirmed cases to 2,193,737 in 35 countries, territories, including the 26 CAFA member states. The new total represents a 0.6 increase in the number of confirmed cases. There were 28,525 deaths recorded in the Caribbean region as of December 13th, 2021. CAPA is also reporting that the risk of further cases occurring in the Caribbean remains very high. Countries must continue to focus on interrupting the viral transmission and reducing mortality associated with COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, here at home, a total of 26 new positive cases were reported on December 10th. Since that date, an additional 44 cases of COVID-19 cases have been recorded with 7 new recoveries. A total of 90,257 samples have been processed by the Dr. Dale Lander-Smith Laboratory, representing some 84,891 individuals since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. As of December 13th, 77 active cases of COVID-19 are currently in this territory, Mr. Speaker. One additional death has been recorded, which now moves the reported COVID-19 related deaths to 39. The last death, while occurring in a person who was COVID-19 positive, determinations continue to be as to the specific role that COVID may have played in this death. The current spread of cases is 3 on Anegada, 68 on Tortola, and 6 on Virgin Gorda. 27 cases were diagnosed on travel screening, with 33 local cases and 15 contacts of cases. This represents, Mr. Speaker, a significant increase in cases over the last several days. Mr. Speaker, we are all well aware of the Yuletide and the festive season, and that in an effort to stimulate the economy, that a number of COVID-related restrictions have been relaxed, and a number of tourism-related activities continue in the territory. The government has clearly recognized the need to balance lives and livelihoods. As the territory and the world continues in the second year of COVID pandemic, 21 months to be specific, it is imperative that we find ways to live and function with COVID-19. In the initial stages of the pandemic, when little was known, the main tools were public health measures, including social distancing, hand hygiene, and mask wearing, coupled with a number of more aggressive measures such as curfews, lockdowns, and business restrictions to curb the spread and impact of COVID-19. However, over the last 21 months, we have seen the development of 19 months, that is, we have seen the development of vaccines for the prevention of COVID and the introduction of more effective medications to treat sick persons. Vaccines have been a game changer in terms of reducing transmissions in populations and reducing the incidence of severe disease, hospitalization, and death. The availability of more effective treatment protocols and therapies have also improved survival from COVID's more severe medical impacts. Your government, your BVI government, through the Ministry of Health, has taken several steps to protect the public
Travis,
and
hold on.
improve. Yes?
Please hold a minute. It seems as if we are not live. Please hold a minute. Thank you.
Yeah, I was looking for it earlier and I didn't find it. I thought since no one else was saying, it was just me. So this is a take two I'll have to do.
Let us see what's the problem.
I would say yes. The
No, I
news
was
is for
looking for it when in order to post it, but
no, but
I simply didn't see it. Well, how come
your
no one else said that?
your report is for the public, so the public isn't hearing it. You will have to do it over. It's not just for us.
Well, I thought so. What I'm saying is that how come no one else had said that we were not live?
You had songs so good we didn't want to stop you.
Yeah, we put it in the chat, so that's what
Live?
happened.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay. Yes, I think we're live. Sorry about that. I'm being told that we're live now. I'd like to apologize to all those on Facebook who are actually hearing us, but we're also due to be live on YouTube. So stay with us, and we'll make sure that no words that will make us less than honorable will be uttered.
Okay, good. Honorable members, it seems as if we are live on YouTube but not live on Facebook.
No, we're live on Facebook and not on YouTube because Facebook is showing me. I've just put in the chat where we are on Facebook.
We are on YouTube.
We're also on House of Assembly
Yes.
BVI. Yes.
Right. So we're going to continue, Mr. Speaker. I mean, Mr. Honorable Malone. How far are you in your presentation?
Starting over.
You want to start over?
Yeah,
Please
I'll
do.
have to.
Honorable Speaker, I think you should start over.
Please
Yeah,
do.
I'll have to. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, can I just ask a quick question? So we're live on ZBVI as well?
I don't know if we are live on ZBVI. We are live now. We are on YouTube. And I was just over on Facebook. So I would like to continue so we could proceed.
All right, Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Thank you. Please
Mr.
proceed,
Speaker,
Honorable Malone.
Mr. Speaker, point of information, what I'm looking at here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That doesn't cut it.
I cannot hear you, Honorable Fraser.
There you go, there's number 7.
We always had 7. Honorable Keynes is in the room as well.
Now you gotta be on the screen. Okay.
Point of information, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if we paused that we weren't live on Facebook and YouTube, isn't it imperative that we also ensure that we're on ZBVI as well, which is customary?
Well, I think it's
I'll have
critical
some.
that we do so we can get the feed into actually ZBBI. I'm being told there's nothing right now on ZBBI, so we can please.
What I'll do, I'll call recess for
Yes,
5
please.
minutes and let's get this fixed, please.
Thank you.
Honorable House is now in recess. Honorable House resume its sitting.
We
I
only
would
have
like to apologize to the public for technical difficulties at this moment. I will now resume calling the honorable member. We have him alone to give the report on COVID-19.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank this honorable House for the opportunity to give an update on the COVID-19 situation in the Virgin Islands as at 13th December 2021. Mr. Speaker, since its publication of December 6, 2021, CARPHA is reporting that an additional 13,692 cases of COVID-19 were confirmed in 32 countries within the Caribbean, bringing the region's total confirmed cases to 2,193,737 in 35 countries and territories, including 26 of CARPHA's member states. The new total represents a 0.6% increase in the number of confirmed cases. There were 28,525 deaths recorded in the Caribbean region as of December 13th, 2021. CARPHA is reporting that the risk of further cases occurring in the Caribbean remain very high. Mr. Speaker, countries must continue to focus on interrupting viral transmission and reducing mortality associated with COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, here at home, a total of 26 new positive COVID cases were reported on December 10th. Since that date, an additional 44 cases of COVID-19 cases have been recorded, with 7 new recoveries. Of the total 90,257 samples that were processed by the Dr. D. Orlando Smith laboratory, representing some 84,891 individuals. This was done since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. As of December 13th, 77 active cases of COVID were currently in the territory. One additional death has been reported, which now moves the reported COVID-19 related deaths to 39. The last death, while occurring in a person who was COVID positive, determinations continue as to the specific role that COVID may have played in this death. The current spread of cases is 3 on Anegada, 68 on Tortola, and 6 on Virgin Gorda. 27 cases are diagnosed on travel screening, and 33 local cases, and 15 contacts of cases. This represents, Mr. Speaker, a significant increase in cases over the last several days. Mr. Speaker, we are all aware of the Yuletide and of the festive season, and that in an effort to stimulate the economy, that a number of COVID-related restrictions have been relaxed and a number of tourism-related activities continue in the territory. The government has clearly recognized the need to balance lives with livelihoods. As the territory and the world continues in its second year of COVID pandemic, it is imperative that we find a way to continue to live and function with COVID-19. In the initial stages of the pandemic, when little was known, the main tools were public health measures, including social distancing, hand hygiene, and mask wearing, coupled with a number of more aggressive measures, such as curfews, lockdowns, and business restrictions, so to curb the spread and impact of COVID-19. However, over the last 19 months, we have seen the development of vaccines for the prevention of COVID and the introduction of more effective medications to treat sick people. Vaccines have been a game changer in terms of reducing transmission in populations and reducing the incidence of severe disease. hospitalization, and death. The availability of more effective treatment protocols and therapies have also improved survival from the COVID's more severe medical impacts. Your government, your BVI government, through the Ministry of Health, has taken several steps to protect the public and improve the territory's resilience towards the COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of entry requirements, Mr. Speaker, have been tailored to balance free flow of tourists and persons coming to the territory to facilitate tourism and other economies with the need to protect the population from the importation of cases of COVID. While compromises must be made, the balance between life and livelihoods must also be met. Therefore, the government has adopted a tiered approach based on vaccination status and paired with a testing regime to provide more or less freedom of access based on risk to guide a system of entry testing and quarantine for persons entering the territory. As it relates to vaccination, through the partnership with the UK government, in particular, the FDCO and the UK Health Security Agencies, formerly the Public Health England, they have provided access to the AstraZeneca vaccine, and 18,000, to date, 18,357 residents have availed themselves of the opportunity to be vaccinated, with 16,875 being doubly vaccinated or fully vaccinated. The United Kingdom government will be providing additional doses of AstraZeneca to ensure that persons are able to have both doses. Additionally, through the same partnership, residents of the Virgin Islands will soon have access to Pfizer vaccines, both as boosters and third doses, but also for persons who have not been eligible, unable, or unwilling to have the AstraZeneca vaccine. This, Mr. Speaker, we're proud to announce that if all goes well, tomorrow, Wednesday, the 15th, the actual doses of the Pfizer and additional AstraZeneca vaccine will be delivered to the territory. The Ministry of Health will be prioritizing initially the elderly over 65 years of age, those with immunocompromise, children between the ages of 12 to 18, and frontline workers. Subsequently, Pfizer will be made available to more persons. Initially, later this month, just over 44, I think it's 4,600 doses will be made available, with additional doses becoming available in January and continuing into next year. The United Kingdom has pledged to supply all of the vaccines, whether it is Pfizer or AstraZeneca, as is necessary within the territory. What have we done as it relates to healthcare and health services preparation? Mr. Speaker, millions of dollars of direct and indirect investments have been made in the BVI Health Services Authority over the last 21 months to provide the necessary testing capacity to conduct PCR and other testing necessary for the diagnosis and the treatment of COVID-19. A number of other improvements to ready the territory to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic has also been made. Your Virgin Islands Party government has not rested on its laurels. The Rotund Clinic and outpatient clinic renovations in the old major people wings are just about completed and will enhance the delivery of primary care and provide expansion for potential isolation spaces if required. The third floor of the Dr. D. Orlando Smith Hospital has been configured into a special care unit for the treatment of COVID-19 patients, and numerous changes to workflow have been made to adequately manage COVID-19 in the facilities. There has been considerable investments and donations, including those from private citizens right here in the territory, from the United Kingdom government in equipment, including ventilators, personal protective equipment, and laboratory supplies and equipment to ensure the health services are ready and able to handle any surge in cases. In terms of public health measures, Mr. Speaker, the Environmental Health Division and Public Health Division have spearheaded disease surveillance, contact tracing, handling of COVID cases, and together with the Tourist Board, the Health Services Authority, the Ports Authority, have tirelessly managed the entry quarantine processes. The Environmental Health Division, together with the Public Health Unit, Social Distancing Task Force, the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force, have also implemented and enforced the various social distancing and other public health measures to keep the territory safe. The government have passed, I am, proud to say that we, over the months, the government have met in cabinet over 94 times in 2020, and to date in 2021, have met 56 times to consider legislation and other requirements in order to keep this territory safe. The government has passed a number and a variety of quarantine, entry requirements, and public health measures through a myriad of legislations and regulations for the control and suppression of COVID-19 in the territory. The Government Information Service and other partners have spearheaded the dissemination of communication and information to keep the public abreast and knowledgeable throughout the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, the government, through the Ministry of Health and Social Development and its other agencies and departments, have provided these measures and programs to balance protection of the territory from COVID-19 with the need for livelihoods and economic activities. At this point in time, it is incumbent on the population to heed the need for personal responsibility and exercise temperance over the holiday season and adhere to the established measures for the prevention of COVID and avail themselves of opportunities to be vaccinated and access boosters when they become available. It is clear that many of us have become complacent, as evidenced by the many pictures of maskless persons at gatherings and parties, and evidence of people who knowingly associate with others while sick. These actions are jeopardizing both the lives and livelihoods of others. As we seek to enjoy the festive season and spend time with friends and loved ones, let us all remember that COVID-19 is still with us and still does not discriminate. The onus is on residents to do the correct thing and abide by the established measures so that we can quickly reverse the current trend of increasing COVID-19 numbers. The Delta and Mu variants are here in the territory. We are aware that Delta remains the most important strain in the territories. The current vaccine provides good protection against Delta. Omicron is on our doorsteps, having been identified in multiple countries worldwide, including the United States, from which the country has the majority of its visitors, and only recently has been identified closer to home in Trinidad. There are many unknowns about Omicron, but for now, the recommendations are that we should seek to have a high level of fully immunized, of full immunization in our population, and also introduce vaccine boosters, which will be available in the territory later this month. Mr. Speaker, I would like to close to wish all season. In closing, I would like to wish season's greetings and admonish all of us to do what we need to do and take the personal responsibility to adhere to the established protocols for Prevention of COVID in the Territory, the Environmental Health Division, the BVI Health Services Authority, the entire BVI government, together with the police department, will be closely monitoring adherence at gatherings and establishment, and the government will be monitoring the situation very closely. Lives and livelihoods must be preserved. I again wish everyone a festive 2021 Christmas, a happy Christmas, and a bright and prosperous 2022. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mayor, Minister of Finance, to lay report of the Standing Finance Committee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for that. And I would also like to thank the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Health, sorry, for that full report and timely report. Mr. Speaker, as Premier Minister of Finance, I move a motion to lay on the table of this honorable House the report on the deliberation of the Standing Finance Committee appointed by the House of Assembly of the Virgin Islands to examine the draft estimates for the year 2022. Mr. Speaker, I so move.
Do I have a second?
Mr. Speaker, I second the motion.
Motion has been moved. Those in favor and second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The motion is passed. I call on the Minister of Finance, Honorable Premier.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to now move a motion, Mr. Speaker, to debate the motion for the debate on the merits and principles of the bill entitled Appropriation 2022 Act 2021. Mr. Speaker, I move that the debate on the merits and principles of the bill entitled Appropriation 2022 Act 2021 take place at this time. And Mr. Speaker, while I'm doing so, I would like to just make some brief contributions in order to get the debate started. So with your kind permission, Mr. Speaker, I may begin.
Honorable Premier, before you begin, if I may interrupt, what I would like to suggest first before we start, and to let the public know how the debate will be done. It was said that everyone will speak for 2 hours. I will be using a timer that when everybody is speaking, and when it's 10 minutes, I will allot them the 10 minutes left. And when it's 5 minutes, I'll also allot you again. When the 2 hours is up, I will mute your mic if you continue to speak. You may continue, Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for laying the ground rules that we won't speak, that every member has a maximum of 2 hours to speak. But I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, my introduction will not reach nowhere near that. I could assure the House of that, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to, first of all, state clearly that I'm very appreciative of the efforts of our House of Assembly staff and the Speaker and you, Deputy Speaker, and all the Ministry of Finance staff, the House of Assembly members, all the public officers, and so many persons that have been involved, even as we were by the kind treatment that we received during the Standing Finance at one of our top hotels, Marriott by the Sea. So I want to put that first, but I want to say though, we thank God for being here to pass another budget, Mr. Speaker, on time, based on how the Constitution has aligned it to be, which has been one of the areas that this government has improved upon since taking office. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to say that never before in the history of the Virgin Islands has the country, or British Virgin Islands, and its elected government faced so many challenges of such intense magnitude at the same time. Since 2017, there has been high demand on government. with limited supply and in a global economic environment that is imposing a multitude of pressures. We all recall the impact on our infrastructure, our economy, and the social situation due to Hurricanes Irma and Maria and the August floods. We all recall the state of our schools, our government buildings, our public infrastructure, such as our ports, our tourism industries, especially the cruise subsector, just to name a few, and including our hoteliers and many others. Public officers were owed years of increments which they had already worked for and which they deserved to be paid. We recall how behind the modernization and digitization of our public services had lagged behind, and even how the structures of our public service needed to be modernized. We recall that all our airports had not only fallen under disrepair for lack of maintenance, but had been suffered for the incremental improvements that would have maintained and improved the Virgin Islands' competitiveness in the international tourism markets. Mr. Speaker, we also can recall in terms of the neglect of our repairs to many of our public infrastructure, but mainly to our schools. Mr. Speaker, the neglect of the governance function was so bad that 2019 started without an approved budget in place. And just as your government took office only in February 2019, had stabilized some of the more critical issues in the economy, just as we have done that, COVID-19, the worst pandemic in over 100 years in the world, struck. And when it struck, it continues to linger on up to today. Economic activity was ground to a halt, not by any mistake or mismanagement by your government, but by the global public health threat that COVID-19 posed to international travel, tourism, and trade, and the need to protect the health, safety, and lives of the residents and people of the Virgin Islands, and to protect our economy from catastrophic damage. In the midst of dealing with the dynamic and constantly shifting challenges of COVID-19, the UK government thought the time appropriate to launch, or what we call an imposed commission of inquiry in the British Virgin Islands, going into matters that are more than a decade old, where some of the persons involved are either deceased or no longer with us, and where paper records have been affected by wind, rain, and flood from the hurricanes. Your government, however, cooperated with the COI with the limited resources that we have, while managing the pandemic and working to reboot and re-energize the economy and to look after the social needs of our people. And let me repeat that our government has always stated, and we remain resolute, that we support a transparent and independent commission of inquiry that will yield a just outcome. Mr. Speaker, we just were concerned about the timing and the manner in which it was brought into force. Mr. Speaker, however, we are confident, Mr. Speaker, that we will be able to last the test of time. And we are confident, Mr. Speaker, that the people of the Virgin Islands will overcome in these areas, because we know that there are areas that need improvement, like everywhere else in the world. And when those are highlighted, we will improve. Mr. Speaker, we also know that we, as the people of the Virgin Islands, have to guard our reputation at all costs. Mr. Speaker, and an objective observer who have seen all of this, taking into consideration all the challenges, all the limitations, and all that has been achieved in the last 3 years, and especially in the last 2, will come to only one conclusion. This present government has been working in a way that has not been seen in the Virgin Islands for a long time. Mr. Speaker, with low and limited resources and high demands, your government has been able to conduct major repairs to some of our major roads, alleviating major hazards. We have reopened the seaports on Tortola, Jocelyn Dyke, Anegada, and Virgin Gorda, and we have expanded their functionality. The airports at Virgin Gorda and Antigua are also reopened with enhanced functionality. We have upgraded community centers and some of our school buildings. We have done the preparatory work to get the work done on the other schools and centers ready for groundbreaking. In some instances, this has already happened. The same can be said for government buildings that house our public officers and serve our public. Your government has done a lot of work to bring along outstanding legislation, especially good governance legislation, forward to get it passed and implemented. And may I re-emphasize that no one has insisted that we do so, and no one has pushed us to do so. We did so because it was our solemn promise to the people of the Virgin Islands, with many more to come in terms of the Human Rights Commission, in terms of the Freedom of Information Act, and many other legislative items that will strengthen and further strengthen our good governance. And others at this time are also near to fruition, which will include how do we strengthen our agriculture and fishery industry, and also with water and sewage, making it a statutory body. So there are many other legislations that are on the way or currently being discussed even by this Honorable House. Through our astute and focused management, your government, together with all our partners in the departments, units, and agencies, and with our valued private sector and other stakeholders, have positioned the Virgin Islands economy for growth. And this is evident because we have not only done so, Mr. Speaker, with the past budgets and with this budget, but we are also working with the United Nations subsector group that is working with us to formulate the National Sustainable Development Plan, which will be a forecast of how we want to see the Virgin Islands and build towards that within the next 15, 20 years and beyond. So you just have to look past the propaganda and idle rhetoric, Mr. Speaker. The Virgin Islands borders and economy have been open with other economies and jurisdictions when other economies and jurisdictions were locked down. Our head has remained above the water while others were on the brink of going under. And this is not to do in any comparison, but it is in the mindset to say that we thank God, our Father, who we truly believe in, for looking over these Virgin Islands in some of the worst times ever seen in the world. And over the past few months, as we ramp up our reopening, our businesses, especially those directly dependent on tourism, but also those across the wider economy, saw a promising resurgence in activity. But the key still remains vigilance. And all the signs are showing everything is in place for the Virgin Islands economy to surge forward in 2022. But the key is vigilance. We just need everyone walking on the same page, cooperating, being vigilant, and being proactive as we continue to adjust to living and working with COVID-19, what we call now the new regular of living and working with COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, the plans, programs, and projects outlined in the 2022 budget are aimed at driving the resurgence of the economy in this COVID-19 era, creating jobs, supporting business expansion, especially small businesses, creating an ecosystem for economic diversification, pushing the Virgin Islands more into digital world and digital economy, boosting our competitive advantage in tourism, travel, and business, and delivering on the expectations of our people while managing COVID-19. We recognize that in any budget, especially in these challenging times, everyone will not get everything that they want. But in this budget, we have tried our best to make sure that the areas that are needed will allow us to generate revenue to get more of the areas that we see that we also need that may not have all been covered in this budget. But Mr. Speaker, the important thing is that we have also presented a budget and kept the country over the years of fighting and living with this COVID-19. We have kept the country from deficit spending and from going bankrupt. The objective for us in looking at what we have achieved and what we will achieve in the year ahead and beyond, especially in the face of the challenges and obstacles, will conclude that your present government has lifted the bar on government performance. We have set and we continue to set a standard of delivery by which we hope the public will judge our predecessors and against which they will hold all future governments accountable. Even outside of projects in terms of legislation, if I may, Mr. Speaker, you have seen us pass a suite of e-government legislation that will help us with the digital economy. But you've also seen us pass legislations or policies or in terms of the ministerial code so that there'll be a clear mandate on how ministers would perform while they're in office. We've also, Mr. Speaker, you've seen us pass the whistleblower legislation to further strengthen good governance in the way persons can report when they see wrongdoing. You've also seen in this House where we have passed a contractor general legislation, where persons can query contracts, even in private citizens, to make sure that we are getting value for money and that everything remains up and above on the board. Mr. Speaker, you will know right now in the House we have the Integrity in Public Life Act that is there and the new Police Act, Mr. Speaker, that we hope to pass, if not by the end of the year, by the beginning of the new year. And I've mentioned some others before that will be coming to the House. So we have raised the bar not only, Mr. Speaker, in the accountability of the people's money, but also in terms of good governance, which is needed, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that the people of the Virgin Islands gets value for money and representation of value. Mr. Speaker, if we can do so much with so little in such short time, then those before us have some answering to do. And the people of the Virgin Islands must use our performance as a yardstick for measuring the value that should go with their support and even their vote. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2022 is about pushing forward, overcoming adversities and challenges, and setting the path for a prosperous and bright future. Mr. Speaker, I do not intend to use 2 hours, Mr. Speaker, to introduce this debate. I intend, Mr. Speaker, to use what I've said, Mr. Speaker, and to do what we have done since we have taken office, which is to use what is in our hand to achieve, Mr. Speaker, what most would say is impossible. We have seen us being very diligent with 94 meetings of cabinet in 2020 to try to mitigate COVID-19, and even 56 meetings thus far in 2021, which is a record in 2020, Mr. Speaker, but a record that we would rather not have based on the circumstances. And Mr. Speaker, we will see our efforts in this budget pay off. And in terms of getting more in depth, Mr. Speaker, I will not steal the thunder of my ministers, Mr. Speaker, in laying out some of the areas under them that will be focused on to help better the lives of the people of the Virgin Islands. And, Mr. Speaker, as a country, we should not let anyone make us feel bad about the good that we have done in an era, Mr. Speaker, where we have seen most countries have collapsed financially and most countries experiencing, like we are, unprecedented financial challenges. And it takes unconventional thinking, Mr. Speaker, and it takes many prayers and working together to accomplish the goals and the aspirations and fulfill the aspirations of the people of the Virgin Islands. Mr. Speaker, this is evident in our programs that we have put forth. And we do recognize that there are many more areas, Mr. Speaker, that needs to be focused on. But with the limited resources that we do have, Mr. Speaker, we are confident that we have hit some good target with many more to hit. Mr. Speaker, we see the budget has allocated for us to move forward with the gaming, to move forward with the medicinal marijuana, to move forward with the digital economy, to move forward with the Trade Commission, to move forward with the even continuing on with the constitutional review, to move forward with more good governance legislation, to move forward, Mr. Speaker, with attending to the maintenance of our schools like never before, to move forward with moving our children from the mold infested areas they are in right now, the El Mostal High School students, back home, bring them back home on the El Mostal High School campus, where the funds, $7 million, have been allocated to continue the project that has started from within this year. We've seen, Mr. Speaker, where we are looking at the roads, the sewage, and Mr. Speaker, where we're looking at many other areas in improving airlift and sea transportation, Mr. Speaker. So we have seen funds and policies within this budget that are going to take the Virgin Islands to another level, Mr. Speaker. But it will take our continuous hard work and dedication and working together. And Mr. Speaker, there's a lot within the weeds of this budget that we will be able to get into over these next 2 days. But Mr. Speaker, I know for sure that better days are ahead for these Virgin Islands. Yes, there'll be challenges, but Mr. Speaker, we have learned how to be patient to be able to fight these challenges. Because in order to learn patience, you must have had some turbulence, because turbulence brings patience. And Mr. Speaker, given that we have seen turbulent times in nearly the last 2 years with COVID-19 and continue to see them, we will continue to press on because we have learned to run with patience the race set before us. And we thank God for his wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. We know, Mr. Speaker, that there are those who will name all the things that still needs to be done and want the people of the Virgin Islands not to take into account the millions of dollars we have spent to keep the people of the Virgin Islands safe and to mitigate against the worst pandemic in the last 100 years over the last 2 years. But Mr. Speaker, we know at the end of the day, our record will not only speak for itself, but the people of the Virgin Islands will be able to say that despite the challenges, thank God we continue to press forward. And Mr. Speaker, we still have to be vigilant with the finances of the territory, not just in terms of good governance, but we also have to be vigilant because we have been spared by God through our prayer and repentance service and fast and praying services, and with the people of the Virgin Islands praising God and thanking him, which has allowed us not to experience any hurricane during this year. It's only his mercies. And Mr. Speaker, we had to put money aside in case things like that happen, or God forbid, even earthquake, which we have increased our insurance in that area by leaps and bounds, but we pray that we never have to use it. Mr. Speaker, we have also seen our stewardship lead us towards getting closer to having our audited financial statements brought up to date, which is the last violation financially that we met, that we are now making sure that we move towards closing the gap and shutting that gap off in addressing those once and for all. So, Mr. Speaker, the facts of our financial stewardship, I know, is not aligned with the gossip and the rhetoric. But we know, Mr. Speaker, with this budget, that our schools will be in better condition. We know, Mr. Speaker, with this budget, that the conditions that they were working on in the schools will be better. We know with this budget, Mr. Speaker, we will see many things coming out from entrepreneurs, Mr. Speaker. We know that through this budget, we'll be able to generate new revenues to help our people go into a new paradigm. Mr. Speaker, that is all I'd like to say in the introduction of this debate, as I will be listening tentatively to the contributions by each member, which is their democratic right. But I know, Mr. Speaker, when the dust is clear, the people of the Virgin Islands can say that they got value for money and that they were able to see and benefit from the works of this government with their own hard-earned taxpayers' dollars. Mr. Speaker, with that, I thank you and I move that the debate for the 2022 budget estimates now begin.
Mr. Speaker, I second the motion. And I reserve my right to speak at another time in the debate.
The floor is now open for debate. I have a list in front of me where the member of the first, I mean, member of the second will speak first, and the member of the third requests to speak second. So I call on Honorable Mitch Turnbull, member of the second district.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Uh, and I say good afternoon, I believe it is, to everyone, the people of the Virgin Islands. Mr. Speaker, it is indeed any day that we have to be alive. It is indeed a great day in this territory that we must force give God thanks. And I know we are coming down to the end of the year, Mr. Speaker, so I want to just take a moment, Mr. Speaker, to reverence God for his goodness, for his mercies towards each and every one of us, our families, and all the persons in this territory, especially my family, the people in the second district community, whom I represent and have this privilege and an honor to serve, Mr. Speaker. I remain eternally humbled, grateful, and endeavor to continue to serve them in excellence to the best of my ability. Mr. Speaker, we are here debating the 2022 budget. I know, and I am not going to um, mince my words, Mr. Speaker. I know there has been some difficulties and challenges within the House of Assembly and the staff. I want to commend them for their tireless efforts, Mr. Speaker. I see that the report that the Premier just laid on the table. I received correspondence after 1 a.m. So I know that means that the staff have been working tirelessly. I have not had a chance to review the final report, Mr. Speaker, but I want to commend the clerk and all the team at the House of Assembly, including you, Speaker, and everyone involved, the Ministry of Finance, all departments, statutory bodies, heads, chairmen, chairpersons that came before us. I want to also acknowledge their presence to the stenographer and all persons down to the custodial workers, Mr. Speaker, who were there with us and who pushed through to the Honorable Attorney General as well, who has been there with us. Mr. Speaker, it is also another challenge that we had is we usually would get the final draft of the budget book. We had draft A, but I know again, given time constraints, I would let the Premier Minister of Finance um, speak to that. But I know we haven't received the final draft of the budget book. But I know, based on what we've been able to accomplish during the Standing Finance Committee, I think we'll be on good footing. It is not the norm, Mr. Speaker, in terms of how things are done and executed throughout the House of Assembly, but I know it is indeed challenging times, and I still want to stay on the right foot in commending and recommending that we just continue to encourage the persons that work in the public service to try to make the lives of the people of Virgin Islands who we serve as leaders better. Mr. Speaker, I also want to take this time before I get into the meat of my debate to remember the persons that over this 2021 year that we have lost. I know the Minister of Health just reiterated the numbers to us. For the 2021 year, we have lost a number of 39 persons to COVID-19, this pandemic. 40 would be inclusive of the person, the one that we lost in 2020. And Mr. Speaker, I want to extend my sincere sympathies, prayers of strength, prayers of comfort, and hope to all individual families and family members that are remaining. Mr. Speaker, I want to take the time to remember specifically the persons within my district over this 2021 period who we would have lost um, as a result of God calling them home, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I remember Miss Joan Dawson, Mr. William Reimer, not in any particular order, Miss Amelia Tonti Emmy Davis, Blanche Blyden, Ruben Shinnery, Oliver Shinnery, Rudolph George, Martha Solomon Todman, Miss Rubina Harrigan, Miss Vancita Todman, Miss Dorothy Donovan, Miss Harriet Herbert, Miss Nashima Smith McKenzie, and Mr. Speaker, I also want to recognize Ms. Todman from the Spooners Estate area who would have passed during this year. Mr. Speaker, those persons in my community, this Christmas season, this season that comes, that we're going to celebrate the birth of Christ, where we shake and spend time. Those persons within my community and within the larger Virgin Islands, Mr. Speaker, would be without those individual family members, Mr. Speaker. And I want to just take this time, Mr. Speaker, to take a moment of silence on their behalf with them to just reverence their families and remember the lives and the impact that those persons would have had on us in this Virgin Islands. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, while it is important to remember the memories of the persons that we've lost, and the impacts that they've had, Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of talk about legacy. There's a lot of talk about what do we want our legacy to be? What do we want and what we hope to be remembered by, Mr. Speaker? And I can't help but always reflect on the scripture that speaks to living a life that is pleasing unto Christ, following the example that he left for us, Mr. Speaker. And I believe if we focus on, the Bible says, if we lift him up, he will draw men and women, boys and girls to himself. So, Mr. Speaker, if we continue and we aspire to have a legacy, it should be one that is fashioned after doing what is right, after loving mercy, after is walking humbly before our God and men, Mr. Speaker. And that is what I aspire. So while we remember those giants, while we remember those family members whom we had lost, Mr. Speaker, over this last year and even before, Mr. Speaker, it is important to always remember that whatever they had instilled in us, it is our duty, it is our responsibility, Mr. Speaker, to keep that legacy alive and live a life that they, even if they were here, they would be pleased with as we continue. Mr. Speaker, I also want to shift a little bit and highlight what I would call, Mr. Speaker, business professionals. And Mr. Speaker, we are all remote, but I must seek the permission to refer to some of the notes that I have written down. So if you see me holding my head down, that is why. So I'm just seeking your permission to refer to my notes as I make my contribution, Mr. Speaker.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to highlight business professionals. I always take the time to recognize young people, young professionals, persons who are doing positive things within our community. And this speaks to legacy. This speaks to the foundational building on the foundation that has been set before us in this territory. There have been some heroes, Mrs. Speaker. There have been those who have taken calculated risks during these difficult times in the COVID era, who have been able, Mr. Speaker, to go outside the box, break the glass ceiling, so to speak, and endeavor into business, endeavor into the ways of encouragement, endeavor into ways of creating a niche market and a niche area for themselves. Mr. Speaker, we have highlighted heroes and sheroes of COVID since this pandemic, but I want to take the time to highlight some individuals. I want to start with highlighting Mr. Brent Hoyt, Mr. Speaker, one of my cousins and constituents. Mr. Speaker, for the first time, I think in the history that I am aware of this territory, Mr. Brent Hoyt took the gospel when we were on the lockdown, where we were unable to meet and fellowship together. He took the Sundays, Mr. Speaker, and he got some persons together and were able to have praise parties. Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize him, and now since then he has gone on to further his endeavors and his outreach. I want to recognize him and all the persons that joined with him to do the various outreach of praise and worship and reverence to God. Because, Mr. Speaker, worship simply means extravagant respect, what we give God our very best. I want to recognize also other professionals, Raul Jugu Sproul, Miss Chantel Malone in the athletic field, Kyron McMaster. We have Mr. Bunchy Whitley down in Anigada. We have Mr. Alan Gumption, Mr. Speaker. You have Heritage, who is doing his thing on the radio. You have Ashimba Fred, Whitney Glasgow, and Yocasta Glasgow, who have all invested in business. You have, Mr. Speaker, you look at Alexa Hodge, who's doing her delights, who's baking some amazing cookies, Mr. Speaker. Whether you want chocolate chip or oatmeal, these are persons within my community, Mr. Speaker. Then you have Mackenzie Baltimore, Demoy Hodge, who is leading in the basketball arena, representing territory now on ESPN just about every game. Jovan Klein, KJ Headley, Mr. Cletus Matavius. You have Toya Whitley of Hustlers Never Fold, Kristen Fraser of Treffle. You have Kishma Penn, who's been a vocalist, Pico Moth, aka Kareem Pickering, Cindy Roseanne, Maria Smith, Shane Liebert, Mr. Speaker, who we saw, another cousin of mine who we saw now starring in Netflix on a huge movie series that made the territory prior. I know his mom, a blessed memory, will be extremely proud of him, and I know his family and Pastor Liebert is extremely proud. But we are proud, Mr. Speaker. Then you have a little young girl by the name of Lily Foy, Liliana Foy, Mr. Speaker, who has Lily's Lemonade. She has been doing that for the last couple of 3 years since the pandemic, Mr. Speaker. And she's an entrepreneur who's not even 12 years old, but she's doing amazing things. Then we have, Mr. Speaker, you have Ryan and Kimberly Adams, who just opened a jewelry store out on the Pear Park. Deja Hodge, who is burning up the track and field in Atlanta and making records, Mr. Speaker, who are making us completely proud. Dante Pascal Watley, and then you have Elena Phillip, Mr. Speaker. Those are some of the young persons that I just want to take time to highlight, because even though things may seem um, gloomy, even though things may seem that is nothing coming out, Mr. Speaker, these are young persons. And there are many others who I have not mentioned, Mr. Speaker, who are making their mark in this territory abroad, but representing the Virgin Islands in a tremendous way. Mr. Speaker, I want to highlight now and take the time to highlight as we go through what this budget and the exercises we met all the departments. I want to highlight some of the areas within the second district community that we've been able to accomplish, works done, works carried out, and even prepare for the 2022 upcoming year. Mr. Speaker, I don't and I will never be the one that doesn't say thanks or acknowledge when something good has been done, Mr. Speaker. I know what it means to be grateful, and I am eternally grateful. Well, what I don't want, Mr. Speaker, or never want, because I understand this arena that we're in politically, is that when you hear what has been done, it seems like it has been done in absence or without the voice or the beckoning of the district representative. Highlight some of the things that have been able to be accomplished under this administration, Mr. Speaker, with the voice and the beckoning of the district representative. Mr. Speaker, there have been the completion of the Ballast Bay Bridge, which I now asked the Minister for Transportation Works and Utilities questions in the House of Assembly since he first got elected in 2019. That bridge, along with the road, Mr. Speaker, that leads down to two of the elder persons, the now more elder persons within the second district community, my great aunt, Miss Esme Stout, and Miss Teacher Yvonne Dawson. That roadway has been repaired. Construction of the basketball court at the Ivan Dawson Primary School. I see the concrete works has been done. That's where we were able to have the students and teachers were able to have their concert, the Christmas concert on last week, and waiting for the works to start on the Just Van Dyke Primary School, which should be in short order. Mr. Speaker, as representative during this year of 2021, we've been able to, my committee and I and the persons that join with me in the second district, we've been able to do a number of initiatives based on the budget that was allotted to us um, each year as district representatives. We had successful back to school supplies and readiness kits for the now six primary schools in the second district. The Ivan Dawson Primary School, Just Van Dyke Primary School, Montessori, Agape Total Life Academy, Enos Adams Primary School, and Imagination Primary, which is the newest school in our district, Mr. Speaker. So the second district is indeed on the move. Education is key within that community, and I do my part to contribute. We've been able to partner with the Rotary Club of Tortola, Mr. Speaker, in gifting the Ivan Dawson Primary School with over $40,000 of technical support, from computers to iPads and different microscopes. And we've been able to have that partnership with the Rotary Club of Tortola for the Ivan Dawson Primary School, as well as receive a check for $50,000 for the Enos Adams Primary School, Mr. Speaker, early in this year. So I am grateful and thankful to the Rotary Club of Tortola for their partnership. Mr. Speaker, we were able to partner with private partners for financial and much needed support for equipment. We've had fridges, we have stoves, we have fans that have been donated in partnership with the district representative to give to the schools that are in need. We've also been able to feed over 200 families when we were on that first initial lockdown, Mr. Speaker. And I want to acknowledge Dr. Henry Jericho and his team for allowing us to participate and bring food to the persons within the second district community who were in need and were grateful for the meals that they received. I think it was somewhere over 10,000 meals or families in total that were given up through that initiative. I know other members of the House of Assembly participated as well. Honorable Premier, Honorable Fraser, and I believe Honorable Vanterpool as well participated. So I just am highlighting it, Mr. Speaker. And then the partnership, Mr. Speaker, extends through even the supermarkets, Mr. Speaker, within this community that we have called the Virgin Islands. And it always reminds me that, especially after the hurricane of 2017, I was able to witness what that camaraderie, what that love, what that um, foundational aspect, Mr. Speaker, of the BVI culture, what it represented after 2017. I heard my grandmother talk about that. I have my parents talk about where we loved and we cared for one another. And I want to recognize Walmart and Super Value, Roadtown Wholesale, Bobby's Marketplace. I want to recognize Rudy's Mark on Just Van Dyke, as well as Roses and Cool Breeze Market on Just Van Dyke, for partnering with myself as representative to bring much needed supplies and aid to the persons that whether they were out of work, whether they were unable to work, Mr. Speaker, to provide for their families during that time. So I am indeed grateful. And through our budget, Mr. Speaker, as well, we've been able to bus students who have returned to school. We've been doing that program for the last 7 years, actually, from high school to primary school, bus children to and from school on a daily basis. And we are grateful to our partners for partnering with us and making that initiative go for the students within the district, Mr. Speaker. Then we look at, Mr. Speaker, they've been able to contribute for special awards and book scholarships for the graduates of the 2021 graduated class, as well as sponsor two successful swimming programs over this past year. With the Sea Aquatics program, we have been able to graduate 45 young students between the ages of 6 and 14 who have moved from beginners, some into intermediate, to those who have now graduated to do the scuba diving classes. I want to recognize those initiatives that have been carried out within my district, as well as, Mr. Speaker, on every Saturday, yours truly has been engaged and continues to be engaged with a 32-week youth mentorship program for the children between the ages of 6 and 12, that we help them to be able to express themselves with confidence, courage, hope, faith, and belief, and be able to at the end of the program hopefully have them to be able to write a business plan and be able to articulate what they want to do, what they want to achieve in life. Mr. Speaker, so those are some of the things that we have been doing and I have been doing within the district, given the budget that has been allotted to me. And Mr. Speaker, I am grateful to all the partners, to all the persons that have participated, all the persons that have sent their child or children and benefited from any of the outreach that we've been able to do over this last year. Mr. Speaker, as we go specifically now into the budget, I don't have, as I said, I don't have the final draft, so I would work with what I have in the notes that I've made, Mr. Speaker, from this budget. But when we look at um, what we've been able to accomplish, Mr. Speaker, and what we are looking at within the territory, Mr. Speaker, there is and there continues to be challenges, there continue to be difficulties. But Mr. Speaker, it is not lost on me that some of the challenges, some of the difficulties that we've had, some of the difficulties that we are facing, Mr. Speaker, is not anything that is new to us, is not anything that we haven't faced before. And Mr. Speaker, I want to zone in as it relates to the areas under that fall under different ministers, but make up the overall government of the Virgin Islands from the statutory bodies all the way over, because we have seen each and every body, Mr. Speaker, that came before us during the standing finance deliberations. And I just want to highlight some of the areas, Mr. Speaker, that stood out to me, some of the areas that I believe we are on the path to do certain things and certain things that we would have to ensure that we are putting measures in place. Mr. Speaker, if I would start with in 2015, and it seems like every budget, Mr. Speaker, I have been saying this same thing, but in 2015, Mr. Speaker, I learned from this exercise that we were in a position as it relates to the uncollected revenue in the territory. I learned that we had just about $50 million. That was the number that was reported to me then. $50 million of uncollected revenue within the territory of the Virgin Islands back in 2015. Mr. Speaker, every single year since then, I've been asking for us to, what is going to be the approach to start for the collection of those revenues, while appreciating, Mr. Speaker, the new revenue earning measures that we have put in place, that the ministries, the bodies that are responsible for the economics and revenue generation within the territory, even though they might have new earning measurements, Mr. Speaker, there is a loophole, Mr. Speaker, where we continue to have uncollected revenue within this territory that added up at that time to the tune of some $50 million. Mr. Speaker, year after year, we've heard we're going to work on it. We heard new revenue earning measures, Mr. Speaker. There's some reports that I've asked for from the ministry and team within finance, some of which I've received, some of which I haven't, but I will do my best to represent the thoughts and make this presentation, Mr. Speaker, because I have a job to do to represent the people of the Virgin Islands who have placed me here. Mr. Speaker, what I find is, and this is my suggestion, we have purchased systems over the years from 2015, 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, and even 21, Mr. Speaker. If the government bodies and departments through the ministries have purchased different systems, different softwares to be able to help them with the accounting and help them to report better, Mr. Speaker. And the one question that I've always been asking is, all these systems that we're purchasing, do they speak the same language? Can the financial secretary of the Virgin Islands, from a request given from the Premier of the Virgin Islands and the Minister of Finance, at the punch of a button, Mr. Speaker, give a report to the actual to-date revenues, financial stance, economic stance of the territory of the Virgin Islands on any given day? Mr. Speaker, over the years we've heard, it's a work in progress. It is something that we're working on. And this year I was told that the system and the software has been purchased, Mr. Speaker, and it is now where we'll be able to have the ministries and departments speak the same language, so that the financial secretary and the Ministry of Finance will be able to have real-time numbers, Mr. Speaker. There are some difficulties and kinks within the system that they need to work out, Mr. Speaker, but I believe it is a step in the right direction, Mr. Speaker. However, my humble suggestion, just coming from a financial space, coming from operating and understanding business and management, Mr. Speaker, there needs to be a determination, a policy decision that is made by this administration, within the Ministry of Finance, within the government of the Virgin Islands, that we have a cutoff point, Mr. Speaker, because some of this debt, some of the monies that are owing to us, is some 15 or 20 years out, Mr. Speaker. And I believe a decision would have to be made in terms of what is the cutoff point, that we go from, whether it's 10 years back, 15 years back, and everything forward, we try to and start to collect and write off the rest. But Mr. Speaker, something has to be done, because this number, even though we have this proposed budget of 300, I think it's 394 million dollars, even though we have this budget, Mr. Speaker, that number of 50 million plus will continue to pull behind us as much progress as we're making, as much of the things that I heard the Honorable Premier said in terms of accomplishments and things that we've been able to do. Mr. Speaker, that particular number will continue to follow us and be behind us if we don't address it and find a way to cut off at some point, and then move on towards having somebody or a group of persons to be able to start collecting the revenues of a territory, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also when we look at what is happening in terms of the stimulus, is when we look at the grants that have been given from Social Security, we look and we hear some of the numbers and the reports that have been done, Mr. Speaker. There were some numbers again that were requested that we haven't received, but I'm just going to speak based on what reports were put out there, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have to put ourselves in a better position where no one, Mr. Speaker, at any given time, the auditors have their job to do, the accountants have their job to do, but no one outside of these Virgin Islands, Mr. Speaker, should have to ever come into this territory, into any ministry, any department within the House of Assembly, and tell us what we know we should be doing, Mr. Speaker. Systems don't work, Mr. Speaker, people work. And we have to find a way to ensure that we, as the leaders of this territory, are putting the measures in place, putting the protocols, and enacting, Mr. Speaker, enforcing that the things that we have not been doing, that we know we should have been doing, that it is not a question, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't become a question anywhere down the line. Mr. Speaker, when I come now to the banking within the territory, I've asked questions several times in the House of Assembly over the last course of these 3 years, relating to what the banks have been doing and what the banks' intentions are for the person of the Virgin Islands who are without work, who have been unable to pay their loans, pay their mortgages, pay for their business loans, or whatever the case may be, Mr. Speaker. Yes, there have been some that have given moratoriums in terms of honoring the loans and waiving some of the payments, Mr. Speaker. But there needs to be a holistic approach, Mr. Speaker. And I am going to zone in and hone in, Mr. Speaker, specific on the bank that I believe the government of the Virgin Islands has a major stake, if not the only stake, in which comes down to our bank, Mr. Speaker, the National Bank of the Virgin Islands. Mr. Speaker, it may not be popular, but it is just my humble suggestion, my humble thought, given my background and given some of the understanding that I have. We may not be in a position to dictate to the private banks, to the bancos, to the Scotias, to the Republic banks, to all the other banks. We may not be able to dictate when they relax their payments or their interest payments or whatever it may be, Mr. Speaker. But I believe we have enough of a stake to start to look at what is happening with our national bank. Mr. Speaker, when National Bank started, I came back to this territory in 05, in 2005. Before the name changed, it was then the Development Bank. And if I go back to the understanding of that name, the Development Bank simply was set up to put persons within this territory in a position that they are able to whether lend money, borrow money, but be able to develop themselves, develop their businesses, develop their children through scholarships and sending them abroad. Mr. Speaker, we have to go back to that foundation because what we see now in this territory is a number of persons who are losing their homes because they have been unable to pay their mortgages or loans. They're losing their businesses. They've been threatened with foreclosures, Mr. Speaker. And then what we're going to have, Mr. Speaker, what is going to happen? Yes, in any crisis, there's always opportunity. But Mr. Speaker, what we're going to have is we're going to find ourselves moving away from the foundation of what this territory was about, what our forefathers fought for, what the visionaries of our territory like H.L. Stott fought for, where we are developing this territory for those that will come after us, for those that we have now are paving the way for. So, Mr. Speaker, it is a balancing act that we need to consider certain steps in terms of what we're going to do with the interest payments on these mortgages, on these business loans. How is it going to be possible? What is the economic impact of these things versus businesses that we've had long-standing throughout the territory? Because while we have given a $40 million stimulus from Social Security, which again is the people's money, the National Bank of the Virgin Islands is the bank of the people of the Virgin Islands as well. So we need to find a way to bridge the gap that while we are operating the bank in the sense and the operation that it has, look at ways that we can also offer stimuluses to the persons who can now keep their businesses afloat. Not saying that we are completely writing off their debt, but completely writing off the interest payments or whatever the case may be. But Mr. Speaker, I believe a look needs to be given the debt that's on the books for the persons that are facing these difficulties and challenges, and look at what possibilities could be done. Whether we take the director, the CEO of the bank, and understand the dynamics, and the ministry team from the Ministry of Finance looks at what is against us, what are we up to lose in terms of our people and our businesses, and people losing their homes, families being out of work and out of their homes and out of businesses. What is that impact going to be? Are we able to do something to help persons in that field? Mr. Speaker, these are just some of the things that I have been thinking about. I think it is something worthwhile that this administration should consider, especially given this time as we are recovering, as we are getting back on our feet, so to speak, Mr. Speaker. There is, however, this tremendous debt, this tremendous responsibility where persons have been trying to subsidize and keep their employees working, pay their bills, keep their businesses running, pay their mortgages, Mr. Speaker, but they are behind. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, is something that it touches and affects the lives of families, of individuals, and Mrs. Speaker, not just individuals, but persons who are employed by these business people. And Mr. Speaker, persons might say, well, Honorable Tombo, are you saying that we, because I hear it, Mr. Speaker, persons might say, well, Honorable Tombo is saying waive the payments and the National Bank should go under and the bank should go under. No, that's not what I'm saying. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, it is part of the economic outlook of the territory that we must ascertain the debt that persons have in the bank versus what would happen if they are unable to pay, if their mortgage is foreclosed, if their business loans collapse, and then other persons come in and buy up those businesses. Then you have a transformation of a change in terms of what we were able to establish in this territory based on a pandemic that none of us expected or none of us have been able to control. But we are putting our people in a position where we offer some sort of solution or some sort of assistance to them to help them go a little bit further, Mr. Speaker, because I believe and I am hopeful that we will bounce back, that we will recover fully from the effects of this pandemic. But it is going to take a while, Mr. Speaker, and it is not lost on me that the banks and the business owners and the persons that have to pay their mortgage are facing these real challenges and situations, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to move now to the statutory boards that we have. And I want to take just some time, Mr. Speaker. I have asked, I became aware of some information, Mr. Speaker, and I want to share it because I'm not sure what is happening. Mr. Speaker, I am aware that just a few short weeks ago, another two key persons within the BVI Airports Authority, senior persons, have tendered their resignations, namely, Mr. Speaker, the Director of Finance, as well as the Acting Director of Operations. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, you have where you've had now 3 managing directors that have all moved on from the Airports Authority. Mr. Speaker, when the civil aviation came before us, I asked the question in terms of what is the remit of the work and responsibility that they have as it relates to the airport. And it is one of regulatory assistance and guidance and support that they will be given to the airport. But Mr. Speaker, the board of directors at the Airports Authority have now seen 3 managing directors, a financial controller, and a director of operations resign since the board has taken effect. Mr. Speaker, I am by no way an aviation professional, but I know for a fact, based on the conversations that I've had with persons working within the Airports Authority, that there is a lack of confidence, there is a lack of support or even morale capacity, Mr. Speaker, within the employees that they are overworked. And Mr. Speaker, this is what is troubling to me. If we don't have the competent persons in place, Mr. Speaker, and I understand that we're expecting a new managing director or somebody to take over coming from one of the Caribbean islands. I heard, Mr. Speaker, don't quote me on it, but I heard the school children say, and the school children usually don't lie. I heard that they're coming from Trinidad. because this current managing director, I believe his last day is either today or tomorrow. But Mr. Speaker, what happens? And I am fearful that if this is taking place at the airport authority, an airport, Mr. Speaker, is not a candy shop. It is something that deals with lives of persons, from your air traffic controllers to the people on the ground to the people everywhere. Mr. Speaker, has to be in place, and safety is of utmost importance. And Mr. Speaker, I think a serious look, a serious introspection, Mr. Speaker, inspection within the body of the airport authority needs to be taken to address some of the concerns, Mr. Speaker. I don't know the regulatory body, ASI, and even the civil aviation. I don't know what the plans are, but I'm highlighting it, Mr. Speaker, because it has been brought to my attention. But I don't believe, Mr. Speaker, I won't want to ever hear, God forbid, that there's incident at the airport or with an aircraft coming in and the proper persons weren't in place to do what they need to do. And we had and have been aware of a situation that we haven't done anything about. Mr. Speaker, another statutory body. I've asked regarding the Social Security Board. Social Security Board, Mr. Speaker, is the BVI, one of the BVI's top success stories in terms of it stands right up there with financial services. And Social Security Board has been able to build a fund of just about $1 billion, Mr. Speaker. But now I understand that the current board is not made up, Mr. Speaker, is not comprised of professionals that will cover certain areas. Mr. Speaker, the investment portfolio of the Social Security Board is something that is extremely important. But I don't know, based on the questions that I've asked and the answers I've received, Mr. Speaker, that we don't have a financial person with a financial background on the board, Mr. Speaker, that understands what would need to happen so that when reports come, they can understand and digest and be able to advise the board as well as the government. Mr. Speaker, we have to take a look because we cannot lose sight that even though the board has been able to accomplish this almost $1 billion under assets and management, that we become comfortable that we took $40 million and then we just let things happen, Mr. Speaker, because if we're not careful, the very thing that we have in our hand, we could lose it if we're not responsible. Mr. Speaker, the Health Services Authority. It is before I go into that, Mr. Speaker, I always must take the time to recognize, commend, celebrate, and applaud the hard work of every person, every individual that is employed, that has anything to do from a ministry standpoint down to the clinics and the cleaners that has anything to do with health services in this territory, and applaud them for a tremendous and exceptional job that they have done since the onset of this pandemic, even more, Mr. Speaker, through the difficult times that we've had in July of this year, and now with the different variants and the different challenges. Mr. Speaker, I want to take the time to personally commend them and say thank you to each and every one of them for their commitment and dedication. And Mr. Speaker, with their commitment and dedication, we know there are challenges. Because, Mr. Speaker, we're learning day by day that we're losing more and more of our doctors and our nurses and our healthcare workers to persons, not just to the United States anymore, Mr. Speaker, but we're losing them to our brothers and neighbors in the Caribbean region. Mr. Speaker, I believe, and I said it during the Standing Finance Committee, I believe that we must ensure as good as a job that they have done, Mr. Speaker, during this pandemic, we must ensure that the payments and salary scales and compensation packages for our healthcare workers, Mr. Speaker, are in fact at a cutting edge competitive rate, that we do not continue to lose our nurses and our doctors and our practitioners to persons within the Caribbean region, Mrs. Because we cannot afford it. We used to have the complaint where persons that we sent away to get their education, they're not coming back because they receive a higher paying job. But Mr. Speaker, now are those that we have in our hand, now we are losing them because they have become overworked, they become frustrated, and the opportunities just for higher income is being presented to them, Mr. Speaker, and they're now moving on to seek those opportunities, Mr. Speaker. It's something that we need to pay attention to. The increments, the salary skills that persons have being overworked, Mr. Speaker. It is something that needs the direct addressing of our government, of the ministry professionals, and we need to ensure that we just don't say that they are appreciated. We just don't thank them for the work, Mr. Speaker. But the evidence is shown through their compensation packages that they are in fact appreciated and now involve and bring in new persons. Because, Mr. Speaker, it is overbearing sometimes and even disheartening to hear what the Dr. D. Orlando Smith Hospital doesn't have, and the specialties that we don't have, and the equipment that we don't have. Mr. Speaker, if we are going to continue to build this great territory, this country of ours, Mr. Speaker, investments in our people must be first and foremost, Mr. Speaker. The development of our people must be first and foremost. It cannot just be, Mr. Speaker, about roads and buildings and having these grandiose ceremonies, Mr. Speaker. We have to put the investment into the greatest and underutilized resources in this territory, which is our human resource. Develop our people, Mr. Speaker, and we will build this country. Mr. Speaker, to the area of tourism, I've asked April of this year, I've asked again in July of this year, I've asked again in October of this year, Mr. Speaker, about the strategy for tourism. Now that we are reopening our borders, Mr. Speaker, my district, it is not lost on anyone that my district and the second district, from Just Van Dyke to Bruce Bay to King Dynamite to Mares and Spooners and all the other areas, Mr. Speaker, that it is in fact a tourism district. It is in fact the hub of tourism here on this side of the Virgin Islands, Mr. Speaker. And asking for a tourism strategy, Mr. Speaker, I've asked, when didn't get the answer for the tourism strategy, I've asked for a meeting, Mr. Speaker, and still have not been able to get the meeting. Because yes, we're now opening our doors, but what is the plan to mitigate the losses as well as recover some of those losses that we've had based on those tourists and industries and avenues we lost to the US Virgin Islands, to St. Martin and some of the other places? How are our people going to rebound? What is the plan going forward? How do we plan to sustain and maintain this business going forward? Yes, everyone is now selling sand and sea. Well, what is our approach going forward? What am I to tell the people of the second district, within the tourist board, within the ministry, the premier and minister of tourism? What is the planned approach going forward? If you don't want to make it public, I have asked, Mr. Speaker, I have asked, bring me in the room. Bring the people that I represent in the room, the business owners, so that we know what we're working towards, Mr. Speaker, so that we can now reclaim what we've lost, as well as plan for the future, that it will never be threatened in the way it has been threatened before, Mr. Speaker. Yes, the pandemic happened. Yes, there were difficulties and challenges, Mr. Speaker, but that cannot be our Achilles heel, Mr. Speaker. That cannot be our crutch. We need to have a plan in place that the businesses, we're coming down to New Year's in Just Van Dyke. Foxy's is planning their All Years party, which is the first in the last 2 years, I think it has been, Mr. Speaker. What are our plans? It can't just be the same, Mr. Speaker. We have to ensure that we have written plans. The Bible says, write your vision and make it plain. And I teach the young people, if you don't write it, it ain't real, Mr. Speaker. If we don't have a succinct plan to execute and develop our tourism product, Mr. Speaker, then we'll just continue bringing people to our shows and hoping that we get the revenues that has already been established. But there are so many different ways and means that we can earn revenues, that we can develop this product, Mr. Speaker, that puts additional revenues into the government coffers, as well as helping to develop these businesses and institutions that are in these fields. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the National Health Insurance, NHI, I have heard repeatedly now that NHI is failing, NHI is a burden on the territory, NHI is going to bankrupt the territory. Mr. Speaker, NHI, the National Health Insurance, is exactly that, an insurance product. An insurance product that, when it was launched, Mr. Speaker, did not receive the funding, the adequate funding that was requested by the authors, by the persons that put it in place and advised us to do so. Mr. Speaker, NHI is now 2016 to 2021 is just about 5 years old. In insurance, any insurance product, Mr. Speaker, it is still in its 5th year. It is still in what's called the infancy, the last year of its infancy stage. Mr. Speaker, we have an opportunity as a people, because when we launched it and we look at those other Caribbean territories and jurisdictions that came to understudy what we were doing, if you look at their healthcare system and what they've been able to do with their health insurance for their people, Mr. Speaker, it is being successful. Mr. Speaker, it is as simple. It is as simple as correcting what was not done to begin with. Putting the simple funding in place, Mr. Speaker. Under this administration, I understand $7.5 million was put to pay outstanding bills, Mr. Speaker. And there's still another $7 million or $5 million, I think, thereabout, that from the onset that should have been put in before the NHI, the health insurance went live. Mr. Speaker, the NHI has been working for the people of the Virgin Islands. It has been able to help to save lives and preserve lives within this territory. The blame game that's going as who didn't do what and when it didn't happen and what we did versus what they didn't do, Mr. Speaker, the people's lives of the Virgin Islands. This product, Mr. Speaker, and I commend the minister for taking $1 million, the minister of natural resources, the minister of NHI, for taking $1 million to do the study. But minister, the key thing, without even a recommendation coming to you from the National Health Insurance study that you have now being executed, the key thing is simply start to put the monies that should have been put there in the first place into NHI. And I guarantee, Mr. Speaker, I guarantee we will now not have this conversation that NHI is bankrupting the Virgin Islands. NHI provides a service that can be developed. We have allowed some of the private professionals and private providers to get ahead. When in 2016, I spoke about double dipping. I spoke about all the things that were happening then. I spoke about it in 2018. I spoke about it in 2019. Mr. Speaker, we have an opportunity. The intent of what was done and what was put in place can work, Mr. Speaker, if all the measures that are necessary are handled. It is not just the funding, because there are some other nuances, Mr. Speaker, that needs to be corrected in terms of the administration, in terms of the execution, in terms of the underwriting of policies and procedures that happens and who gets covered, Mr. Speaker, because it is going to put me to my next point, Mr. Speaker. In this Virgin Islands, Mr. Speaker, and I am saying it for the benefit of my golden gems, my lovely and beautiful seniors, if you are over the age of 65, the law says that you fall under the category of being exempt from having to pay for health care. It is not up to any individual to dictate who should and who should not get care, unless that piece of legislation comes back to the House of Assembly for amendment. Those persons over the age of 65, as well as those persons between the ages of 0 and 18, who forms a school age and a child, Mr. Speaker, they have exemptions, together with some of our other frontline workers and care personnel. Mr. Speaker, we need to ensure that those aspects of the healthcare, those simple nuances, Minister, those simple nuances that we have people dictating to our seniors and dictating to others what they should pay and what they should not pay. Mr. Speaker, it was brought to my attention that God rest our soul now, but the late Tanti, we just laid her to rest on Saturday, Mrs. Speaker, 9 years old. And her daughter was told that she has a bill at the hospital for care and treatment and medication. Mr. Speaker, we have to get these types of things under control. It seems like everything, Mr. Speaker, is happening and we are hearing certain things and we know about certain things, but until we address them, then it's easy to say this is a problem and that's a problem. But we know what the problems are. We have difficulties and challenges addressing the problems. We have difficulties and challenges enforcing the laws that we have in this territory to make the lives of the people better. Mr. Speaker, I believe that NHI can work. I believe it will work once it is properly funded and once the reviews of what needs to be done is properly done. Mr. Speaker, I don't know how long I've been talking, so if you would please at this time give me an indication so I keep to the integrity of the time that you have put before us, because I am soon to be done.
Thank you, Honorable. You have approximately 52 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr.
58,
Speaker.
58 minutes left.
58. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I promise not to use all 58. I will yield about 2 minutes to the Minister of Health because I know he will speak for a while. Mr. Speaker, when we now look at the health and social development aspect, the Director Chief Social Development Officer came before us, Mr. Speaker, and I am always grateful for the impact and the measures that she has been put in place for as long as she's been in that job to try to help persons and families, even juveniles, Mr. Speaker, within this territory. But Mr. Speaker, I learned that the composite of her staff, given the things that we've faced, is not adequate. And just as you would have heard from many other persons and departments that come before the Standing Finance Committee, that they don't have enough staff, they need more resources. But Mr. Speaker, the social aspect of our territory can make or break us. Mr. Speaker, after Irma and Maria, there were social ills occurring. Before Irma and Maria, there were social ills occurring in this territory, some of which has never met our doorsteps as individual members or representatives or leaders of this territory. But the effects of those occurrences are real to the persons who have become victims, who have had their children, boys and girls, molested because they had to or were forced to stay with Uncle so-and-so, or Mr. so-and-so, or Miss so-and-so. Then you go fast forward, Mr. Speaker. Some of them are reported, some of them are not reported. And then you go fast forward to the pandemic of 2019. This British Virgin Islands territory that we have, Mr. Speaker, is in fact a tourism-based territory. So then again, you had the pandemic, which forced, I think, 3 or 4 different lockdowns where persons have been without work, especially in the tourism sector. The person were without work for some 18 plus months, Mr. Speaker. And then situations arrive. You have to depend on so and so to get you help or assistance to do this or that, Mr. Speaker. And then the abuse on children, the domestic violence cases, Mr. Speaker, and issues that continue to arrive. Mr. Speaker, we continue to allow certain of these things to go unheard or sweep them under the rug, so to speak. And when I heard from the chief social officer, Mr. Speaker, there has been an increase in sexual abuse against minors, against women in this territory. But she doesn't have the resources, Mr. Speaker, to be able to deal with some of these issues. She doesn't have the funding, Mr. Speaker, to be able to carry out and give the necessary support to these families and individuals that are dealing with these issues. Legislatively, Mr. Speaker, we have to amend the Young Persons, the Juveniles Act, Mr. Speaker. We have to amend the laws that deals with sexual assaults and indecencies against minors, Mr. Speaker, because we are breaking down generations of women, of girls, and even some of the young boys who are going through this trauma, Mr. Speaker. That they're the perpetrator of these acts, Mr. Speaker. When they go to court, they receive a bail, the next day sign surety, the next day they're out, and I have to look at the same demon, I'll use that word, that wronged me. And there is nothing, Mr. Speaker, that I can do as the victim from keeping that individual from me, or from threatening me, or from threatening my family, Mr. Speaker. We have to start to protect and do what is necessary to review and put stiffer penalties for these occurrences, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will put it this way. If we continue to let these things occur with them not being addressed, we've just passed the Gaming Act. And while many persons would have expected me to solely speak from a spiritual standpoint, Mrs. Speaker, the social aspect of what will happen. That law, that piece of legislation has been on the books for over a year before it was passed. And Mr. Speaker, it was sad to learn that to date, we have not attempted to put any form of support group, body, or whatever the case may be, to prepare for what we know, Mr. Speaker, will happen as a result of those persons who wish to involve and engage in the gambling and betting, Mr. Speaker, that will have that negative fallout, that will destroy some families and destroy some foundational aspects of our society, Mr. Speaker. We have to be proactive. It cannot be that we are constantly, Mr. Speaker, chasing money and looking at the benefits, so to speak, that we will be able to derive from these monies that we're going to get from this gaming and this and that, Mr. Speaker, and miss the simple mark. Because you could be rich in money, Mr. Speaker, but poor in society. Poor socially, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I am urging us to take the necessary steps, take the necessary precautionary steps to put in place these aspects of social support, of economic support, Mr. Speaker, that will happen, that continue to happen, Mr. Speaker, so that we can continue to build this territory. Because, Mr. Speaker, what we don't ever want in this territory, when we talk about our heroes and foreparents, what we don't ever want, Mr. Speaker, is where we have the have and the have-nots. Because those who have not, Mr. Speaker, want to have. And then we will create a society that violence and crime becomes the order of our day. And then we would then be forced to try to put measures in place to curtail it. Mr. Speaker, part of being a visionary, part of being a leader, Mr. Speaker, is the ability to make a decision, to see things before they happen, and not just see them, Mr. Speaker, but do something about it. So I am urging us, Mr. Speaker, to look at those areas, look at those things that are before us in the social aspect that would affect all of us. Because, Mr. Speaker, I won't want that any of us or our family members have to go through anything that I heard and hear happening in this territory, and we are not addressing it. Mr. Speaker, I move now to education. I spoke about our schools, Mr. Speaker, and the schools within my district. I know that the Just for Night Primary School, Mr. Speaker, is set to start its construction in this upcoming year. And Mr. Speaker, while I am grateful for that, I believe it is only my responsibility to push and urge, as I've been doing in all my district meetings, as well as in the public forums, and even in this honorable house, to push to have this school built in a shorter time span than that pushes out to, I think it was September 2023 in the last meeting that we heard, so that those students over there, Mr. Speaker, can be in an environment that is conducive for learning. Because while we have made some fixes, Mr. Speaker, to put windows and doors and ACs and fans in, Mr. Speaker, we're still in situations where in, I think it's grade 2 and grade 3, those students are still sharing a classroom. Both grade 2 and grade 3 are in the same classroom with one teacher, Mr. Speaker. And in this 21st century, that cannot be acceptable. It should not be acceptable, Mr. Speaker. So I am urging the minister, the Honorable Premier and Minister of Finance through the RDA as well, to whatever I need to do, whatever I can do to support and help raise funds to get that school built, Mr. Speaker. It is imperative that it is done. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to our teachers and educators, it is, there are a lot of firsts. The Premier usually does a good job in terms of what he has been first to do within his administration. And there are a lot of firsts that he doesn't speak on because he says he has a job to do and I have a job to do. Mr. Speaker, this is the first time in the history of my life, 42 years, that I've ever seen teachers in the territory strike. This is the first time, Mr. Speaker, in the territory that we've had occurrences, Mr. Speaker, where our educators have become so frustrated. They have resorted to measures and decisions that adversely affect the students for which they are responsible. Mr. Speaker, the minister spoke and asked that we support him as it relates to funding. I think it's $2 million the minister suggested for, it was for maintenance, Mr. Speaker, and the upkeep of schools. And Mr. Speaker, I told the minister out front that I would support him in that push. And in that request was granted by the Minister of Finance. But then I pushed back again at the Minister, Mr. Speaker. because there are some schools still in this territory that outside of maintenance, there's some additional works that needs to be done. There's some upkeep and upbringing, Mr. Speaker. Our secondary schools, I remember when I was in public school here, Mr. Speaker, primary school and high school. Mr. Speaker, our public schools were leading the charge in terms of education, in terms of being on the cutting edge, in terms of when we graduate our children from high school, they were 15 and 16 years old, going off to colleges and universities and being in the top. Mr. Speaker, something has shifted. So besides the maintenance of the buildings, Mr. Speaker, besides the upkeep of the overall buildings and structures, Mr. Speaker, there needs to be a digging in, Mr. Speaker, within the system of education, because something has shifted. I know, Mr. Speaker, we moved to, wanting to diversify and make it okay for everyone to be successful and have these high averages of passing rates, and who have 86 and who have 94. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, we're fooling ourselves when we get into those type of competitions and we're not addressing the needs that when someone graduates from primary school level to high school, they have the necessary fundamental skills to be able of math, English, reading, and understanding and comprehension, Mr. Speaker. To be able to go on when they graduate, they're able to go into the college and exceed. But Mr. Speaker, on top of that, you have instances where the traditional education is no longer the norm. The success stories, Mr. Speaker, of persons going into the arts, into the computer sciences, into the different technologies, Mr. Speaker, and earning revenue. Mr. Speaker, we have to shape this territory in this country in a way that we are developing those minds and developing those young persons and making the investments in those arenas, Mr. Speaker, that we have a holistic approach, that we now shift from just having tourism and just having financial services, Mr. Speaker, but we have a balanced economy that on every sphere of this economic outlook for the British Virgin Islands, Mr. Speaker, we have persons excelling. It is all right, and Mr. Speaker, it is not all right. I correct myself. It is not all right for us to just celebrate and get on persons' bandwagon when they excel in track and field, and when they excel in getting this accomplishment and this law degree and this doctoral degree, Mrs. Speaker. We have to go back to the foundation. We have to go back to the foundation. Mrs. Speaker, I always question. We operate on a vision that was cast by H.L. Stone over 30 plus years ago. We're still operating on that vision. Mr. Speaker, it is time for new vision. It is time for a new outlook. It is time for a new body of ideas that the persons within this territory can feel hopeful, can want to be a part of, Mr. Speaker, because it is okay to keep saying that we want to look into our young people, we want to invest in our young people, and we want our young people to be the future leaders, but Mr. Speaker, they don't feel a part of. Because outside of saying it, Mr. Speaker, the evidence of what has been done and prepared for them to take over, to lead, to manage, Mr. Speaker, it is not there. It is not showing, Mr. Speaker, and that is what we need to move to in this territory, where persons feel a part of. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Fraser, the Honorable Andrew Foy, the Honorable Mark Vanterpool are the senior members in this Honorable House in terms of the longevity in the House. Mr. Speaker, each one of these men weren't given a handout. They were given a hand up. They were given an opportunity by leaders like H.L. Stout, by leaders like Ralph T. O'Neill, member emeritus, like Dr. Orlando Smith, given a hand up to lead, Mr. Speaker. And here I am, Mr. Speaker, at 42 years old. There are persons and professionals in their 20s, in their 30s, Mr. Speaker, who have the ability to make millions of dollars and contribute to this economy and employ hundreds of persons, Mr. Speaker. Those persons that we won't necessarily have to worry about again, but some of them are just looking, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. Not a handout, Mr. Speaker, but for the opportunity to be invested, to hear their ideas, to hear their thoughts and their dreams, Mr. Speaker, that they can contribute. And Mr. Speaker, we continue to shut the door on them because there is somebody else in that seat that, because they have been there for 20 years and 30 years and 40 years, Mr. Speaker, we are fearful to move them for what will not happen. Mr. Speaker, there is this quote that states, that current behavior times intolerable pain causes change. And sometimes the risk, Mr. Speaker, of leaving makes it uncomfortable for us to stay where we are. Mr. Speaker, we have almost milked this cow of financial services to its end. I recognize Dr. Rob Matavias, who has stood, Mr. Speaker, who has sacrificed, and his family, to build financial services and take it to the next level. But Mr. Speaker, tourism has to be developed. Education has to be developed. Fishing and farming has to be developed. Not just talked about. Investments have to be made, Mr. Speaker, and not just $13,000 and $20,000, Mr. Speaker, but investments, Mr. Speaker, that would have and show returns, that we are no longer exporting and importing everything in this territory. Mr. Speaker, out in these waters, as I look out, there are persons that come and take advantage of our waters, take advantage of our environment, and sell our product back to us. But yet we're talking about giving young people the future. Mr. Speaker, current behavior times vision is what causes people to move. Vision, Mr. Speaker, is what causes people to move. When we have a passion for people, for the territory of the country, you realize progress. And knowledge plus understanding must convert to the third level, which is wisdom, Mr. Speaker. There's nothing that we have to recreate. The foundation has already been set, but we have to find ways, Mr. Speaker, and be bold enough to make these moves that will benefit us in the long run. We can't look at those of us who sit in the seat, Mr. Speaker, as leaders of this territory. There is a generation that has to come behind us, Mr. Speaker. How are we preparing them educationally to lead? Mr. Speaker, our culture and our sports, I touched on that briefly. Not just when our athletes make it to the Olympics, not just when our Deja Hodges are breaking records and it's posted all over Facebook, Mr. Speaker. The A.O. Shirley Recreation Ground, the A.O. Shirley, the softball field, the volleyball, the track and field, the soccer, the tennis, Mr. Speaker. Let us set it up, Mr. Speaker. Let us make the investments, Mr. Speaker. The Elena Phillips in swimming, Mr. Speaker, she has broken grounds, created pathways for us to, and those of our young people who will become interested. Mr. Speaker, let us not speak about it. Let us be about it and make the investments that our young people become excited and enthusiastic to be a part of this territory that contributes and earns and grows, Mr. Speaker. Agriculture is the same thing, Mr. Speaker. There are a lot of farmers in this territory. A lot of farmers, Mr. Speaker, who still are yet waiting for their stimulus. While there are those, Mr. Speaker, who receive stimulus and never plant a peas or a pea. Mr. Speaker, the approach has to be one that is not me-centered, Mr. Speaker, but it is we-centered, that we are building generational wealth, that we are building economic wealth, that we are looking at statistics. Mr. Speaker, what is our financial stance in this territory, pre-COVID, and since we've gone through almost 20 plus months of COVID? Where are we, Mr. Speaker? Because on one hand, Mr. Speaker, we hear we don't have revenues and we don't have money to do this. And then on the other hand, we do a supplemental budget and we see money's going here, $14 million going here, $5 million going here. Mr. Speaker, what is the plan? Organized chaos is not how you run a country. If we're going to be leaders, Mr. Speaker, the people that you lead must understand where you're going. And Mr. Speaker, I am encouraging us in the midst, on the heels, Mr. Speaker, of this almost completed COI. As much as we all became cautious and careful, let us not go back to the way that we used to operate, Mr. Speaker, that brought this very thing on us in the first place. We continue, Mr. Speaker, to do it to ourselves. You can't let the good that you do, Mr. Speaker, be outspoken by the bad. Mr. Speaker, the area of beaches and ponds, because I am in a tourism district, Mr. Speaker, it wouldn't be the first time that I have said this. Enforcement of the laws of this territory of persons, individuals, and business owners that continue to damage, fill in, and close off the ponds in this territory, Mr. Speaker, that are directly connected with beaches, are going to help to continue to destroy the very thing that we sell. Mr. Speaker, I am not fearful, whether family, friend, or foe. It needs to stop. It needs to be addressed, Mr. Speaker, and ministries, governments, and departments that have the capability, whether legislation needs to come, Mr. Speaker, we need to do it, because you can't tell me, Mr. Speaker, that you're in tourism, that you're waiting now 18 or 19 months for tourism to open, but you have helped to fill in the ponds. You have helped to pollute the ponds. You have helped to fill in the area because you want to quote unquote claim land that is not yours. And then when that happens, you want government to do something about it. Mr. Speaker, we have to get serious. And the other issue, Mr. Speaker, we have an issue where sewage is a problem now, becoming a problem territory-wide. No one is going to tell me, Mr. Speaker, in my 42 years I live in King Island, Beach has been closed once, twice. And Mr. Speaker, we try to fool people sometimes, but you can't get all the people and fools all the time. So we find ways and said pollution due to runoff from the hillsides and the dirt, Mr. Speaker, when we know we have sewage issues. Mr. Speaker, let us do the things that are necessary to be done so that we don't have to continue going back and fixing, because when we do, we go and do over. When we do something, we go and do over. When we say we're going to do something, Mr. Speaker, it's almost, well, let's pull back, let's do it again because we forgot to plan. Mr. Speaker, planning, strategic planning and implementation is essential. Let us look at the areas. If we're talking about tourism, if we're talking about diversifying this economy, let's look at how it's going to weigh in. What are the statistics? What are the economics behind it? And see the ways and means that it affects this part in terms of bringing in revenue, but how would it adversely affect this other part, and what do we do to balance it? Because building a territory, Mr. Speaker, cannot be just about chasing money and chasing revenues and talking about all the good things that you want to do from the revenues that you're going to get, when on the other hand you're hurting people. Mr. Speaker, it takes balance. Mr. Speaker, the area of the road works and infrastructure, the area of water and sewage. Mr. Speaker, I learned that we have now on the books on this house the first reading of for the Department of Water and Sewage to become a statutory organization. Mr. Speaker, the numbers that came before us in standing finance, permit me, Mr. Speaker, let me just look at what I wrote down. The number that came before us, Mr. Speaker, is that the Water and Sewage Department is paying out in excess of $22+ million a year and collecting just about 4 or 5 million. Mr. Speaker, the issues surrounding the department in terms of broken pipes and people are being charged for it, or being billed for water that they're not getting because there's nothing but air there coming out of the pipe, or, Mr. Speaker, meters put so far from the person's residence, which I understand now legally, when a meter is installed, supposed to be installed to your residence, it's supposed to be 100 feet from your residence, but some meters are put some 200 and 300 down yonder, Mr. Speaker, that John Public is tying into these meters, and now you're being billed. And Mr. Speaker, I am urging the minister and this administration, let us not move with haste to just make it a statutory organization, because if you make it a statutory organization and not correct the issues that we know exist, you're going to just have a statutory organization that is bleeding the government, because we're going to have to continue to subsidize it. And they're going to want new this and new that because the statutory organization. Mr. Speaker, let us address the issues and the things that need to be fixed. You can't tell me, Mr. Speaker, to this day and age. Yesterday, I looked in one of my group chats. Just when they got the water, they have to wait for the engineer and technician to come from Tatola to fix it, or bring this pipe, or bring this pump. Mr. Speaker, it can't be. In this day and age, that's how we're operating. And talking about expending in excess of $20 million every year and collecting for. Mr. Speaker, we need to consider what we're doing before we just go and say we're making it a statute, so it becomes a problem unto it's going to be a problem, Mr. Speaker, because the people are going to come to us. You can't tell me that people applying for water and paid for water over 5 years still hasn't received water, and that's okay, Mr. Speaker? And we're talking about building and moving ahead, Mr. Speaker. The things that we know have been problem for years and years and years and years, it doesn't make it right to continue say it being a problem for years and we just keep going down the road, Mr. Speaker. That is insanity. That is insanity, Mr. Speaker. And we need to do something about it. Mr. Speaker, I made and make the suggestion publicly now to the Minister of Transportation, Works and Utilities as it relates to our crosswalks. Minister, I've said to you before and I'm saying it again. The crosswalks in this territory, in this country, are one of the most hazardous and dangerous things that we have. We need to put some sort of lighting, some sort of indication that lets it, whether it's flashing at 10 miles per hour or wherever, 5 miles per hour, that once it's flashing, you have to slow down, Mr. Speaker, because whether it's day or night, especially in the night, and somebody's crossing the road, Mr. Speaker, with all the lights coming from the buildings and coming from the billboards that you have, Mr. Speaker, it's sometimes difficult, and we won't want to have someone, Minister, is as simple as getting the deflectors or reflectors. They're in airports and streets all over that depict this is a crosswalk, you must slow down. This is I am making that plea to you to have that corrected, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am going to end my contribution, Mr. Speaker, in just stating that there are and there is much to be done, Mr. Speaker, but in this territory that we live in this territory that we've been gifted and granted the opportunity by the people of the Virgin Islands to represent them, their concerns, their needs. Mr. Speaker, I am ever mindful and I am ever cognizant of the fact that when we lead, Mr. Speaker, we must lead with integrity. Leadership does not dictate manipulation, fear, or chaotic behavior, Mr. Speaker. It is not the use of 500,000 words to say one thing that isn't going right. Mr. Speaker, leadership is about inspiration. If we inspire the people of these Virgin Islands, if we invest in their development, and we reinstill and re-encourage and reignite the confidence that they would have, Mr. Speaker, we would, without a shadow of a doubt, be able to build this territory one district at a time while keeping us all going to a Virgin Islands that we can be proud of. Mr. Speaker, as we celebrate the birth of our Savior Jesus Christ and we tell his story, one of boundless love, compassion, sacrifice, and hope, along with the celebrations like these, this season often offers us a time of reflection and perspective. And over these next few weeks, as we are celebrating the birth of our Savior, as we remember the story of the wayward travelers, a star shepherds, I hope that we also focus ourselves on the message that the child was brought to this earth some 2,000 years ago. A message that says we have to be our brothers and sisters' keeper, that we have to reach out to each other, to forgive each other, to let the light of our good deeds shine for all, to care for the sick, the hungry, and the less fortunate. And of course, to love one another, even our enemies, and treat one another as the way we would want to be treated. Mr. Speaker, after 7 years, to the people of the 2nd District being your elected servant leader, I still believe that we in this territory are stronger together. Our territory and our people have gone through some very challenging and difficult times. This past year, and we have lost 39 persons due to the pandemic, and many others have departed this life. Mr. Speaker, I've seen us recover from the 2 Category 5 hurricanes of 2017, from the depths of our tourism economy being closed for just over 12 months, and the uncertainty in the minds and hearts of many, to an economy that is now beginning to rebound. As we've been able to overcome, as our faith-based foreparents have been able to do, through steadfast will and a determination to succeed and an unwavering faith in God. What I see, Mr. Speaker, is a big-hearted and hopeful, resilient people who look out for each other and don't depend on the government to do everything for them. I see a people, Mr. Speaker, in these Virgin Islands who have each other's backs and who find strength in our difficulties and differences and who keep moving forward knowing that there is hope and better must come. Mr. Speaker, I want to express how much I consider it an incredible honor and privilege to serve my constituents and my country. I continue to feel the warmth and generosity through the many families and individuals that have impact on my life and that of my family. Most importantly, Mr. Speaker, it has been special to share these 7 years with each and every individual. So on behalf of my family, Mr. Speaker, my wife Jewel, my daughter Micaiah, and my extended 2nd District family, I want to take this time to say Merry Christmas to everybody, Happy Holidays, and happy and a progressive 2022. And may God continue to bless us all and bless these beautiful, beautiful Virgin Islands. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank you, Honorable Melvin M. Turnbull, member of the 2nd District. Members, at this time, we will break for lunch and we will resume at 3 o'clock. When we resume, Honorable Fraser will be the first speaker. This Honorable House is now in recess until 3 o'clock.
What time do we come back?
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock?
3 o'clock.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
What are we gonna have for lunch?
Well, I was expecting them to deliver.
I
But
would expect that. I don't see a problem with that.
they ain't asked me where I am, so I guess they ain't giving me any food.
We could arrange that because the services deliver, doesn't matter where you are. You don't have to be,
I think so. I think they're using this virtual meeting as an excuse not to feed us, honorable member.
and because the speaker is supposed to be in what is he in? Some kind of isolation?
Yeah, but he's not the chef. He's not the chef. We have to speak to the speaker about this.
I think so.
It's unacceptable.
Can we send our legal representative to do that for us?
Colleagues, we're still online. We're still online on Facebook, so just mind what we say.
Yeah. Once we adjourn, once we go into recess, we're supposed to be cut.
But that's not the case, so just mind what you say.
I still gonna speak to the speaker.
Unless you find a way to
Now,